Good afternoon now, I think, barely. I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to speak on my favorite topic. Before I start, I want everyone to realize that I like buprenorphine from a safety perspective, and some of the data I will show may alarm people, and we'll get to that at the end of the presentation so that you understand not to throw any tomatoes at me until the end of the presentation. I also wanted to thank or note the fact that RADARS also works some in Europe with the EuroPad network, and Professor Ikra Maramani is our principal investigator. He's not here, but I wanted to thank him, and I also wanted to thank Professor Cariari, Patricia, because she came and spoke at the RADARS annual meeting a few years ago and gave a wonderful presentation. So here we go, I think. Yeah. I won't belabor this point, but the United States has become ground zero. It's kind of the center for prescription drug abuse in the world right now. This is actually old data through 2008 from CDC. It's now updated, and the number of deaths now in the United States is estimated to be 16,000 per year. It has now exceeded motor vehicle accidents as the leading cause of accidental deaths in the United States, which is, for us, is a stunning statistic. But it's very important to understand that this is an international issue. These are some public data that we looked at RADARS, looking at United Kingdom drug-related deaths from 2001 to 2011. It's the top line that really is the one, that's the sum, the total of the different sources, but prescription opioid deaths in the UK, as you can see, have followed a trajectory very similar to the United States, perhaps delayed by a couple years, to the point where they now have 1,200 deaths for their population of 80 million or whatever, compared to the United States at 16,000 for 320 million. So certainly a lower rate, but still a surprisingly high number. So we think this is an international phenomenon, and unfortunately the United States may have been the earliest one, but it's not the only one. I'd like to spend a minute or two describing the RADARS system. RADARS was actually initiated in 2002 by Purdue Pharma, the makers of OxyContin, due to multiple concerns and issues that they had internally. In 2006, the system was actually given to the Denver Health and Hospital Authority. We're a public agency, and it was given with no strings attached. We're a completely independent program. But I want to point out, in terms of my conflict of interest, that the RADARS system is supported by multiple pharmaceutical opioid and stimulant subscribers. In other words, companies subscribe to get the RADARS data. That data is used to fulfill their responsibilities in reporting to the US FDA. It's not allowed to be used for marketing and the like. In the US, we're what's called a safety net hospital. So as you know, the United States does not have good insurance for many of our people, approximately 50 million. And those people go to institutions like Denver Health. We take all comers, all patients, whether they have insurance or not. The RADARS system has an advisory board. You may recognize some of these people, either by name or by their photo, including General Kleber, who spoke about marijuana last night in the upper right-hand corner there. But we also include in our advisory board interesting individuals from law enforcement, prescription monitoring programs, and the like, to get a good variety of perspectives involving prescription drug abuse. Now, surveillance, the principle behind RADARS is one of trying to circumvent the challenges of prescription drug abuse surveillance. So the first, of course, is that patients are clandestine in their behavior. They don't want us to know that they are abusing these drugs, diverting drugs, and so they try to hide their behavior quite extensively sometimes. So it's not, you can't do a normal adverse drug event type of surveillance, which we do for other products, but that doesn't work really for prescription drugs. There's tremendous geographical variability in the United States regarding the abuse and diversion of prescription drugs, so that's another challenge. And it changes. There's a dynamic that has been mentioned here earlier in the sense of people going back and forth between heroin and prescription opioids, for example, and therefore, and when new drugs come in, you can see very abrupt changes, which I'll show you in a minute, and so it makes it another challenge to surveillance. Multiple age groups. It's true that people in the what I refer to as the stupid years are primarily abusers, you know, the late teens to early 30s. But we see actually substantial numbers in older folks. I don't call them elderly anymore, but in older folks like myself. So we're seeing more and more of that actually, and that's a bit concerning as well. So you have to cover the whole span of age groups in order to do surveillance. The RADARS system currently performs surveillance on 15 what we call APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are listed there, but then also dozens and dozens of specific products such as Vicodin, Oxycontin, et cetera. The strategy behind RADARS, in an attempt to try to find these patients who don't want to be found, and patient may be the wrong word, these people who don't want to be found, we take advantage of what happens in their lives to find them when they expose themselves to the system. So for example, when they have an acute health event, they get sick acutely from their prescription drug abuse, they often call a poison center in the United States. The United States is very fortunate in that it has quite a system of poison centers, and it covers the entire country, and so we can find subjects that way. We also look at drug transactions. This is a very unique network run by Hilary Surratt from Miami, and she maintains a network across the United States of 250 to 280 drug diversion investigators who report to us when they open a case regarding a prescription opioid. It's a very unique system and fascinating data, which I'll show you in a few minutes. We have two different treatment programs. One is OTP, which is led by Mark Perino from ATOD, and these are what we colloquially would call methadone clinics, but we call them for this opioid treatment programs, or OTP, and we have 73 programs in 33 states that participate. But we have another system called what we call SKIP, which stands for Survey of Key Informant Patients. And we have key informants who hand out questionnaires to patients that they complete. So both the OTP and the SKIP are giving a questionnaire to patients when they enter treatment. So these represent patients who have reached the end of the line, in a sense. Their career in opioid abuse, if you will, has matured to the point where they enter treatment for a variety of reasons. We also wanted to find something out about people who are just starting their drug abuse, and so we do that through the College Survey, which is a web-based survey that is distributed each semester of the college year, and we accept the first 2,000 responses, which only takes about 3 days, actually, in the wonderful world of the World Wide Web. And finally, we became interested in how much a drug costs on the street, which is a little tricky to find out, but we started with Nab Dasgupta. Nab and I, over a beer, actually came up with this idea to start a crowdsourcing website. If you don't understand crowdsourcing, we can come back to that, but it's a website where people can go in voluntarily and enter the price of drugs that they have purchased on the street. They do this for a variety of reasons, but one is that they can find out how much other people have said they paid for drugs on the street in their area, and so there's some reward to them for participating. Now, before I present data, just one more slide to say that I will be talking about two types of calculations today. One is taking a numerator, the green boxes up there, where we have counts of an event coming in, and dividing that by two different denominators. One is simply population for the same geographic region. So for example, poison centers that participate in our program cover 90% of the United States. We would take the population from that the same service area that they cover, and divide by that. However, the problem there is that the population denominator tells you sort of the public health impact of a drug. So Vicodin is highly abused, and it tells you that. But what it doesn't tell you is for drugs with lower use tend to look more benign just because there are fewer people abusing them, because there's less drug available for them to abuse. That doesn't mean the drug isn't desirable. It just means it doesn't sell as well. So we use another denominator that we call unique recipients of dispensed drug, or ERD. And this is simply the number of people who filled a prescription for that drug. So it gives you an indicator of the amount of drug that came through normal pharmacy channels in that same area. I'll explain more in a second. So let's look at some trends in the United States. I'll just show both parts of the slide. So these are the two denominators. And all I've done in this slide is to total all the programs, or show all the programs on one slide for all opioids combined. Oxycontin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, everything is included together. The top figure shows the trends since 2002 to 2012. And you can see that in each program there has been an increase. If you look at the rates where we take into account the drug availability, which, as I mentioned, is called ERD, you get a much flatter curve. So this indicates that as we have seen increases in abuse in the United States, it's directly related to the amount of drug available. It's not that more people are abusing per unit drug dispensed. It's about the same, but the more drug that's dispensed, then the more abuse that you receive. And we've looked at this many times over the years, and there really is no escaping this rule, I don't think, which is the more drug dispensed, the more prescription drug abuse you will see. Now, there's been an interesting phenomenon in the last couple of years shown by the yellow box here, which is there does seem to be a plateau effect that's developed since about 2010. This does not show in the CDC data yet because their data is always 2 or 3 years old, but RADARS is up to date, usually up to within the last 4 months. So we always have very current data, and what we're seeing, we think that the epidemic has plateaued largely at this point. That doesn't mean we should stop, of course, because it's plateaued at 16,000 deaths, so that's not good. But we do see some effects, I think, of the hundreds of interventions that different organizations have implemented in the United States. If we look at the rank order, I wanted to make a point on this slide. What this slide shows is simply 4 of our treatment programs and the dramatic change in what we've seen in the drug oxymorphone. Oxymorphone is, the brand name is called Opana ER in the United States. This has become quite popular. I'll give you more data on this recently. But in 2011, oxymorphone wasn't in the top 4 or 5, and it in 1 year went up. And the reason for that largely is because of a new formulation of Oxycontin that came out that made it crush resistant, while oxymorphone was not crush resistant. It could be crushed. The other thing to look at there, though, is to see that you can see methadone and buprenorphine are fairly high when it comes to endorsing them for abuse. I'm going to cover that in more detail in a minute. If I can get another slide. There we go. So let's focus now on buprenorphine and methadone. The top line on this slide is total methadone sales through IMS. So this is primarily pill forms of methadone. This is not the methadone dispensed through treatment programs in the United States. As you can see, that's been relatively flat for really the whole well, for this period. This is basically a 3-year period. During that time, though, we've seen dramatic changes in buprenorphine. If you look at the green line are the combination tablets, so Suboxone types of tablets, and you can see that dramatic decrease. Now, this is not abuse. This is just people filling a prescription. So this just is the amount of drug that is being dispensed in the community. As you can see, though, the blue line, which is the new formulation of the combination Suboxone film, has gone up dramatically, replacing the product. And this is because the manufacturer, Reckitt Benckiser, removed this tablet from the market and replaced it with the film. Now, in the last year, we have seen the tablets come back up because those are generic formulations. The Suboxone tablet is no longer available in the United States. And then finally, at the bottom, you see the single ingredient buprenorphine tablets. So this would be buprenorphine alone without naloxone, and how that's increased. And that's because it also has become genericized. And Reckitt no longer distributes that product at all. It's all generic manufacturers. So I want you to keep this in mind as you look at the data I'm about to present. Before I get there, I forgot I put in this slide, which is to show how we do validation of RADARS. And the point here is this is from CSER, the Center for Substance Abuse Research, that puts out the CSER facts. This shows the top line there is methadone, the bottom line is buprenorphine, and it shows how reports to forensic laboratories testing samples have seen buprenorphine come up in recent years dramatically. If we look at that in the RADAR system, we see exactly the same effect. All right, let's look at our opioid treatment program data. So these are methadone clinics. This is people who endorsed the abuse of a product in the past 30 days. In other words, they're asked, have you abused? Not have you used, because they're in a treatment program, but have you, in addition to using it in your treatment program, abused the drug as well? This is where it gets controversial sometimes. The top line is methadone, which was high, but you can see that it seems to be decreasing. There's lots of reasons we could postulate that, but I'm gonna move on and we can deal with that in questions. I should point out this is the population rate, as you can see in the frame up there. So this is not taking into account availability of the drug, which may be the cause of that. If I look at the buprenorphine products in comparison to methadone in methadone treatment programs for this 4-year period, you can see that they're generally flat. The single ingredient does seem to be increasing slightly. The film strip seems to be increasing slightly. And the combination actually decreased slightly. But what happens if we look at that now in terms of the availability of the drug? We get a very different answer. So methadone still is decreasing. That's a good sign. It may be because, excuse me, buprenorphine is replacing it to some degree. But one thing that's of great concern for us is that the single ingredient formulation of buprenorphine has increased dramatically in the past 3 years. That's the same time that it has been a generic formulation. So suddenly it was an expensive drug and became a very cheap drug. And there's been a lot of pressure in the United States on providers to use the single ingredient because it was generic before the combination buprenorphine naloxone was available as a generic. Perhaps not surprisingly, people in methadone treatment programs are now endorsing it much more often for abuse. The other two, so the green line there is the combination tablet, which has stayed pretty flat, as you can see. Start just that last quarter of 2012 going up a slight bit. And then the buprenorphine naloxone film strip is the lowest and is not increasing at all. That's going to be a common perspective here because the film strip has performed much differently than we expected in terms of surveillance. And I'm going to hit that again in a second. Now, let's look at the survey of key informant patients. So these are now treatment programs that are not methadone-based. These are usually private systems rather than public as for methadone. These tend to be a slightly higher socioeconomic patient than in the methadone programs. And let's see what their data shows. Now, so here we're looking at the population rate again. The red line again is methadone, which shows a similar pattern. It was high, but it is decreasing significantly. The single ingredient is increasing here as well. And this is just in the population rate, so not in the ERDs, which we'll get to in a second. Oops, kind of a strange slide. The top slide, so the top frame there really is very similar to the methadone treatment programs. The bottom slide also is somewhat similar in that you see that the buprenorphine single ingredient has increased dramatically in this study as well. Methadone, some decrease. You see that the methadone is much flatter here. The line is much flatter, which means that for availability of the drug, it's still being abused at about the same rate. And just to refresh everybody's memory, we think this is mostly, a lot of this is pill forms. It's not just a drug from the treatment program. There we go. The tablet is increasing more in this program. And the film strip is still low and flat. So that's the treatment experience. 2 different programs, similar results. Now let's look at drug diversion. I mentioned the drug diversion program to you, and here's the initial data. This is the population denominator. Methadone also decreasing. So this means that drug diversion investigators in the United States are seeing less methadone on the street as they practice their law enforcement responsibilities. The buprenorphine naloxone combination tablet has also decreased slightly. The film strip has increased some, it's lower, and the single ingredient are the 2 lines at the bottom, which are upward trending, but much lower than Suboxone. I'm sorry, I should say the combination. Okay. The green, so if we look at the taking into availability, the ERDs, you can see that the buprenorphine naloxone combination is going up greatly in law enforcement. That's what they're really encountering being sold on the streets now. But also single ingredient is fairly high as well, and actually is exceeding methadone with the film strip very low. So why are endorsements of buprenorphine strips so low? We're not really sure yet. I put some theories up here. There's others that perhaps the audience would like to add to. But the reason we think is that, one reason that I'll just emphasize where it says under the 3rd bullet, serial numbers, is that product actually includes a number on a unique identifier on each package. And some prescribers are using that quite effectively to reduce diversion by their patients. So that may be one reason that that's occurring. What about the price? So we have a program, as I mentioned, called StreetRx. This shows the distribution of people who have responded to the website in the United States. We get about 20 hits per day on that website. We validated the system by comparing it to Silk Road. You may have heard in the news last week that Silk Road was busted and shut down, but Silk Road was a illegal form, essentially, of eBay, where you could get anything illegal, really, through Silk Road. It's a fascinating system in itself. If we look at this for price, I've highlighted buprenorphine and methadone, and on this system, buprenorphine goes for a little over $2 per milligram, and methadone about $1 per milligram. Buprenorphine is the 2nd most expensive next to hydromorphone, which in the United States is referred to as the champagne of opioids. A couple last slides is just to show that I wanted to cover the death situation because it's very favorable to buprenorphine. These are poison center deaths that occurred in cases for which a poison center was contacted. The red bar is total methadone. I won't break out the individual ones, but you can see buprenorphine, really all the formulations of buprenorphine are very low. We're particularly interested in children, so here's data cut just for the age under 12 years, and you really see the same pattern. The issue is that one tablet of methadone or one vial of methadone for take-home liquid is enough to kill a toddler. But buprenorphine, we haven't seen that very much, and it's actually quite rare to have a death associated with buprenorphine in toddlers. So we like it also because it's safer in children as well. So let me wrap up here. Prescription opioid abuse in the US may be plateauing, but as I mentioned, it still causes 16,000 deaths per year. Methadone causes more deaths than any other opioid. In the US, it's complicated because roughly half the drug is dispensed through treatment programs and half is dispensed as pills for the treatment of pain in the United States. So that's a challenge because it's very hard to segregate the data correctly. Buprenorphine looks really quite good. We're concerned about the single ingredient and the combination tablets increasing since they became genericized. But I have to say that if people are going to abuse either methadone or buprenorphine, buprenorphine is definitely safer and looks very encouraging in that way. The film strip has surprised us. We thought it would be endorsed just like everything else was in the buprenorphine category, but so far has been very low. And in fact, to date, knock on wood, there have been no deaths associated with the film strip in children, despite the fact that that actually has a major part of the market now in the United States. We're not sure why the price of buprenorphine is high. Maybe people here have a suggestion as to why that would be. And thank you for your attention.